I'm curious to know your main objections to the libertarian ideology. In short, why conservatism over libertarianism?
Okay, so this is a great question. So here's my view on conservatives and libertarians. I have a very libertarian view of government. I have a very conservative view of society. What I mean by that is that libertarians very often will say that social institutions that are conservative are not necessary. So a lot of libertarians are very anti-churches. They're very anti kind of community organizations. They're very atomistic in their view of individuals, that every individual is their own island, and even leaving aside government, there's no reason to have religious communities because those religious communities are oppressive and all this kind of thing. My view of libertarian government is pretty much the same as the libertarians, which is the government sucks at everything and shouldn't be involved in virtually anything. I agree with that. I think that why I'm a conservative and not a libertarian is because I also understand that there's a social fabric that libertarianism doesn't tend to talk a lot about. And that social fabric only exists in the presence of common values that we all share. I say that those values should not be inculcated by government. Those values should be values that are held at the community level. Right? We should all have these decent values that we're taught by our family and by our churches and by our friends, and that's what's going to allow us to live together. Libertarianism falls apart without the social fabric. Every society falls apart without the social fabric. And when society starts to fall apart, what ends up happening is people look to the government to enforce. And so if you actually want a lasting libertarianism, then you need to acknowledge, and I think some libertarians do, but I think it needs to become an increasing thing, libertarians need to acknowledge the value of the social fabric, the value of social organizations, the value of churches, the values of the Judeo-Christian ethic that many of them don't acknowledge. And once that happens, then I think there can be a conservative-libertarian merger. And I think that that's where I hope the conservative movement and the libertarian movement go in the future, as opposed to the libertarian movement right now seems to be split between some people who agree with me and some people who sort of agree with the left on a lot of social policy, leaving aside government, just talking about kind of pansexual free-for-all in Ayn Rand land. And that's not something that I'm fond of. Ayn Rand is great when it comes to capitalism, and she's less good when it comes to her views of how social fabric is constructed.